The Cinephiliac Lounge.
where we drink and deconstruct.
I loved that film. Shh.
Welcome to the Cinephiliac Lounge. I'm Scott Kilroy,
And I'm Pat O'Connell.
and we're two guys who like movies. Every episode, we discuss a movie over a couple of drinks. Today, we're discussing 12 Monkeys and its inspiration, the short subject film La Jette. A warning for listeners, there will be spoilers. But before we get started, maybe we should talk a little bit about us and why we're doing this.
Yeah, we met a few years ago. You know, just for shits and giggles, because I knew I wouldn't remember anything off the top of my head, I found a copy of my Brooklyn College transcript to try and figure out when we might have met. I'm looking at spring of 1990, language of film.
That sounds right. I don't know. I have no recollection of us actually meeting. Maybe we didn't.
That is very funny because I don't know either. Much like 12 Monkeys and La Jette, the subjective memory. I'm not sure when we actually met. I just feel like we've always known each other.
You were one of those guys I caught on really quick, was one of the more creative people in the school. And I figured I could hitch my trailer to this guy. And when he's a big shot in Hollywood, I'll come and crash on his couch.
I'm still working on that.
Yeah, that was definitely my first thinking. Yeah, so we've known each other a long time.
Yes. And we've often sat around at an actual lounge or bar and discussed whatever it was that we've just watched or watched separately or watched at home, and always enjoyed it. And you came to me with this idea. You want to talk a little bit about the genesis of it?
Yeah, I just always thought that our conversations about movies were interesting. I thought that you always had a lot that you brought to the table, and you brought a lot, made me kind of be a little more creative to try to keep up with you. And so I always thought we had a fun time talking about this stuff. And I thought, you know what, maybe an audience would like it. And I'm a computer programmer by trade, and it was pretty easy to set up a website. And here we are.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. It's been a whole lot of fun. Looking forward to tackling our inaugural episode. First one, 12 Monkeys.
Yep, we picked a good movie to start.
I mean, it's fun. It's almost creepy just how relevant and how weird it is that this film, it's the 25th anniversary of 12 Monkeys this year. Even though the film was had an early release in December of 95, its general release across the U.S. was January 5th, 1996. So we're talking about this very close to the actual 25th anniversary of this film, which is pretty awesome. And its inspiration, La Jette, came out in 1963. And so it's very rich material, a lot to discuss, lots to get through. I guess the first thing for our listeners who I'm sure the people already have seen this film. If you haven't, you must. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll give a quick synopsis. Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys, written by David Webb Peoples and Janet Peoples. As the opening credits spell out, 5 billion people will die from a deadly virus in 1997. The survivors will abandon the surface of the planet. Once again, the animals will rule the world. James Cole is a prisoner in a post-apocalyptic future of 2035, where humanity lives underground. James Cole is haunted by recurring dreams of his childhood memory of being at an airport with his family and witnessing a traumatic scene of a very upset and beautiful blonde woman chasing after a man who is ultimately shot. He is offered the chance at a pardon if he will go back in time to find the army of the 12 Monkeys, who they believe are responsible for a man-made virus, so that they can get a sample of the pure virus to find a cure for humanity in the future. Now, Chris Marker's La Jette is a short French film that inspired the 12 Monkeys. It is the story of a prisoner in an underground society in the aftermath of World War III. Because of his strong recurring childhood memory of witnessing a traumatizing incident involving a beautiful woman and a man at Orly Airport, he He's offered a chance of a pardon if he will be the subject of a series of time travel experiments into the past, which he has a strong connection to, and the future in an effort to reach food, medicine, and energy. So those are the synopsis of the two films we're going to discuss. The first thing I'd like to ask is, do you remember the first time you saw 12 Monkeys, and where did you see it?
I do not remember. I remember seeing it. I think I saw it on video. I don't think I saw it in a theater. And I have no recollection of it other than enjoying it. My brain just drew a complete blank. When you brought it up, I was like, yeah, I love that movie. And I'm like, I don't know why. But so watching it again was great. And it really came back to me. I don't know. I must have seen it near when it was released on video. Because I remember it being kind of a big deal amongst, like, the film nerds at school.
Yes. Unfortunately, I have the same kind of story where somehow, when we were in film school, I managed to watch, I tried to watch everything. I saw so much garbage. I saw a lot of good stuff, obviously. But I would watch anything. That changed as I got older, where I became, I didn't go to see everything. And these days, before the pandemic, I probably saw 3 films a year, and of the 5 that I wanted to see. But back then, I would go to see everything. I would be at the movie. I would live at the movie theater. But somehow, and I don't know how, because I loved Terry Gilliam. I loved Brazil. I loved Time Bandits, and Brazil I'd seen in the theater. But somehow, some way, I did not see this film. So my first viewing of this film was renting it on VHS during film school. And I've always, going back to it, especially this last time, I'm like, I really messed up. I really should have seen this one on the big screen.
Yeah, I would have loved to seen this on the big screen, because I don't think I did either.
Let's go to the other part of this podcast. What have you chosen to drink for this discussion?
Oh, okay. Well, I've decided to drink the very named appropriately Monkey Shoulder.
Ooh,
which is it's a Speyside Scotch. They recommend you use it as a mixer, but I like it straight, and it's pretty good. What about you?
That's awesome. I am drinking, it was a gift from a dear friend, Gabe McCallan, 12 years old, Sherry Oak Cask.
Nice.
So also drinking scotch. So, salut.
All right,
take
cheers.
a sip. Now you're a little bit better at describing. I'm very good about just drinking the drink, not so much about discussing the drink. I'll let you go first. How's your drink?
Okay. So I get a lot of like berry flavors, and I get a bit like a little hint of butterscotch. And if you've ever had Glamorage, it's very similar to that. It's and the one interesting thing about the scotch is it's a blended scotch, which means they could use grain alcohol in it, but they don't. It's a pure scotch, even though it's a blended scotch.
That sounds great. Listen, I want to say something that I don't think I've told you before. One of the personal goals in doing this podcast is to get better at appreciating and describing and critiquing what I'm drinking. Because as I said, very, very good at just drinking it. Not so good at breaking it down. So I'm going to try with this. This is the bouquet, the ambrosia of the sherry cask. It's quite spicy. I like it. I don't know why. I probably will be told, but guys out there, if anyone's listening, I obviously am not an expert. I'm getting a little bit of caramel. I don't know why.
Okay, that's valid.
So, 12 Monkeys, La Jette. Which one do you want? You want to just tackle 12 Monkeys first, and maybe?
Yeah, let's talk about 12 Monkeys. I have to admit, La Jette was a little bit of a chore to get through. I mean, I thought it was really interesting. Just so, if you don't know, for the audience's sake, La Jette is a series of still images. There's only one moving shot in the entire movie, with the narrator kind of explaining what's going on. And sometimes the camera zooms in or zooms out, but it's just still images. it was a little tough to get through, I got to admit. I liked it when when it ended, I was like, wow, I could really appreciate that. But there were points where I was like, I want to turn this off because I'm just sick of the still images.
Well, to be a nerd about it, I'm going to point out that when the movie starts, it's a short film. It's only about 28 minutes. The film, when it opens, it tells you clear out. Chris Marker doesn't really consider this a film. He refers to it as un photoroman. So he considers it a photo novel, which is actually extremely interesting. And I can see that it takes a lot of patience and focus, but I can see in those black and white still images and the voiceover narration, there are some things that I could see are very influential. The design, the thought. Even though I thought that 12 Monkeys or Terry Gilliam might have been inspired by La Jette when he was doing the film, because La Jette has a lot of images of the scientists wearing all sorts of weird like glasses, or glasses that are like bizarre, glasses that like lenses on top of lenses kind of thing. And I was
oh yeah, and that he totally got that in 12 Monkeys.
He has that in 12 Monkeys, but I watched a documentary recently, and he claims that he did not watch La Jette while he was doing 12 Monkeys, that he consciously avoided it. So I think it's very bizarre and funny that La Jette has this, that you if you watch the two films, you guys sit down and watch La Jette and you watch 12 Monkeys, you're going to think like, oh, there's some obvious visual like references or obvious homages, because that's what I thought. But apparently that's not the case, which just makes it very, very cool and very weird in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's weird, because I would have assumed the same thing, that he obviously liked La Jette and took certain like elements from it, but he didn't. That they just kind of turned out to be similar. That's kind of weird.
And La Jette and 12 Monkeys, well, all of the major beats in La Jette are used in 12 Monkeys, because it has a similar beginning. You have now, since it's a photoroman and not a film, a story told through still black and white still images. But it points out this is a story of a child who was obsessed with this one traumatizing event. So it starts at an airport. Now the airport's very different. You watch La Jette. It's almost like a pier. I believe Jette in French means pier.
Yes, it does. I believe it does too.
So the airport is very interesting anyway. The fact that there's a long, because it's a long ass pier, and then people are above watching planes below that go ahead and take off. Like, it's not an enclosed airport, it's all open air. So it's very, very cool and very different. But it starts at the airport. It tells a story of this prisoner underground. He goes chosen and is promised some sort of pardon if he will go through this experiment. He goes to the past, and turns out that the end of the film, I won't say it now because we're going to discuss 12 Monkeys, the same exact beat is hit in 12 Monkeys, where it begins and ends at that airport around this one particular event. The other interesting thing and most very important thing is La Jette and 12 Monkeys, the linchpin, it's almost this linchpin that they're both very tied to their referencing of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo.
Yeah, that is interesting that they both have that, and especially, considering that Terry Gilliam didn't watch La Jette. I'm sorry, I'm still kind of like blown away by that. One of the things I loved about 12 Monkeys, that I like all of Terry Gilliam's movies. I even like The Fisher King, which wasn't, I don't want to say it was bad. It was not my favorite of his, but he has a great way of just making the audience feel uncomfortable. And the way it starts out, Bruce Willis's character is in a cage, and there are other people around him, like it's obviously some sort of prison. And just the way that a claw comes and just grabs him and picks him up, and just everything about that just makes you feel like, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's like that vending machine crane that just picks out people for quote unquote voluntary service. it's like Brazil, and it's definitely like Brazil, where it's this total technocratic world where humans are not really in control of their fate. They're mere cogs in a machine. So yeah, it definitely starts off with that. It starts off with the memory. It starts off with the image of a young boy, his eyes, and then the dream, and then he wakes up in that environment that you brought up. And then once he has to get ready for quote unquote volunteer service, which is he has to prepare for going up into the surface world, which he has to get like COVID safe for this surface world. That get up is just amazing because has to put on like a whole condom suit. Then he puts on this deep sea diving kind of apparatus, and then it's like he's, covered then with bubble wrap and like a clear plastic hazmat suit on top of that.
Yeah, it's definitely freaky. And then when he after he goes up on the surface, when he comes back, the next shot of him is naked being scrubbed down, and it's like, you go from this ridiculous costume of like that. I can't even imagine how you could move in that thing. And then, he's immediately, just stripped bare, and, some weirdos just hosing him down with a brush.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, yeah, there's, this movie was one for the ladies, because there's no gratuitous nudity or anything, but there is lots of man ass in this film. lots of man ass like dripping in like milky white, like, so it is ridiculous. It's funny, it's great. It's like Bruce Willis, he has two different scenes of him like being like washed, deloused, and then Brad Pitt also moons the audience and makes probably every woman who saw its heart swoon when he's in the mental institution and shows his ass. So lots of man ass in 12 Monkeys.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting. You'd never find out what Cole was in for. Like, what crime did he commit?
Yeah, that's funny. I went back and I was looking at it, and it was like 25 years, and he's there for 25 years, and it's just like for being disruptive, not paying attention to authority. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But the thing that stuck out to me, because the design and look of this film is very close. It's much like Brazil, but it's also very close to one of my favorite films of all time, Blade Runner. So it's this retrofitted look of the future, where the future is cobbled together from bits and pieces of the past. And so I immediately kind of thought about Blade Runner in those respects. But in that scene where he's first brought to before the scientist after he's been scrubbed down to show his man ass, they call him an antisocial 6, which immediately made me think of Nexus 6.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, Nexus 6 is the Roy Batty and Pris, the model number of the replicants in Blade Runner.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you know a lot more. I think your knowledge of Blade Runner is insanely deep compared to mine. So,
yeah, that one I'm completely obsessed with. But going back to this, so I don't know precisely what he did. They never say exactly what he did, but I might have had notes somewhere. But it was basically like he was a problem in his future society. The future society, after being underground, I know that we're seeing we only see a prison, but it's completely oppressive in every way, and it's very odd that the scientists somehow are the ones that seem to be running everything. Like that you never there's no talk of a president or anything in that society. Now it could be that we're only focusing on that portion, but it's still, from what we're seeing in the film, it's a very technocratic world where only science, the guys who possess that kind of knowledge, are the ones that are somehow in control because of the promise that only science, science created the problem, and the future scientists have somehow seized control by claiming they're the only ones who can fix it.
Yeah, and they don't look like a stable bunch. If you look at them individually, they're pretty creepy.
Well, yes, they all look pretty much like permutations of each other. They're mostly all dudes. There's supposed to be like there's a zoologist, a geologist, an astrophysicist. I'm forgetting some of the others, but it's almost all men, and that the one woman who's very important to the entire film and the story. At the end of the film, she gives her name as Jones, but yeah, and also the scientists and the film in the future, everybody is covered in plastic. Like no matter what they do, they have their clothing or whatever, everything, the paper, the map that he's given to like find the surface world where he's going out to get specimens and runs across, and that's when you see how animals have taken over the surface, where he encounters and scared by a bear, and that's a motif throughout the entire film. It comes up in a lot of different ways, some of which is very funny. When he's in the day room at the mental institution, he sees a commercial about a bear for a commercial. My favorite one is after a couple of jaunts, and he winds up back in the future, and they're like, "Oh, you did such a good job." Now we figured out where the Army of the 12 Monkeys is. They've covered him in a bear blanket. The movie is it's so layered in its design that it keeps this recurring. It's a huge motif in the film or theme is animals.
Yeah, I would say animals definitely, and also just like what kind of subjective reality where you have Cole, Bruce Willis's character, questioning his own sanity in multiple times when he's in different parts, when he's in the future, when he's in the present, him thinking he's crazy in the other scenario. And then you have the psychiatrist who sometimes seems like she's questioning, her sanity, where one of the cops tells her, maybe you have Stockholm syndrome because she's siding with Cole, who kidnapped her, basically.
Yeah. As I said, it's very layered. There is a lot of technique in the story and in design, trying to make sure, editing in every way, trying to make sure that the audience, as well as Cole, questions his sanity and whether or not what's happening is actually real, or if he is, as one of the patients says, mentally divergent.
Right.
There's a lot of referencing in the film, like, oh, you're only thinking about that. You're saying that because you think this is about a virus because you happen to have met Goins in the hospital, and he mentioned that his father was studied or was an expert in viruses. So everything is, there's very overt ways that they do this, and then there's very, very subtle ways, which this film, much like Blade Runner and the films that I tend to really get enamored of or obsessed with, are the films that are so dense, so layered, that every time you watch it, you recognize or see something new. And 12 Monkeys, getting ready for this podcast, I watched it. I had seen it a little, a year before this and caught some things, and watching it for this podcast. And I watched it again a couple of days ago. Every time I catch more and more. And some of the things that he does, it's very subtle, where there's a point where he has a guard. There's the guard from the future. He's blonde haired. He's the one that's like, he brings Cole before the scientists in 2035. And he's the one that says, are you going to be a problem, when he tells him it's time for voluntary duty. There's a sequence when Cole escapes with the help of Goins from the day room, and he's totally drugged up, and it's very hard. He gets out, and he's trying to he's making his way to this elevator to escape. And you see a security guard, and when he first looks at him, the actor is the actor who's playing the guard from 2035 with the blonde hair. And he looks at the elevator, and he sees people coming out. He turns around, he looks back, and he sees, and it's a completely different actor sitting in the same spot reading. Actually, I caught this also. In both instances, the security guard is sitting there reading a world news like Inquirer. There was like an Inquirer kind of tabloid.
Yeah, I remember the Weekly World News with Bat Boy.
Yes, Bat Boy.
That's something that unfortunately I think a lot of people didn't get to experience, but we were lucky enough to be at the time where we know what Bat Boy is.
But that ties into this whole notion. The film is completely packed to the gills with this theme or motif of the subjective nature of memory and perception. Can you trust the world that you're in? It's almost like Philip K. Dick paranoia. So subjective nature of memory, and this film also is which is also the subject of La Jette, but 12 Monkeys takes it to subjective memory and subjective, like cinematic memory and pop culture memory, because the film is riddled with referencing throughout of other films or using clips from TV and films to reference time and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and I mean, one of the things that really surprised me was the film starts out and you're totally disoriented because Terry Gilliam and the scriptwriters assume that the audience is going to catch on eventually. They're not spoon feeding you, what's going on, and so you feel kind of disoriented in the beginning, and then by the time he gets to the insane asylum and he's in the day room, you thought you were disoriented before, and now you're completely disoriented. Just the way some of the people are acting and everything. Like, I don't know how anyone could go through that and be sane.
Yeah. No, the film is throughout maintains a level of controlled insanity within the storyline and within the characters. Because there are points in the film where there's a lot of direct referencing by the inmates as to who's crazy, the inmates or society. There's a lot of movies very anti-establishment, anti-consumerism in many of the things that the characters are saying and pointing out.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting that Goines, who seems like Jeffrey Goines, which is Brad Pitt's character, who seems pretty not mentally well, but a lot of what he says is true, ends up being true. Like, he talks about his father and like his father's an important man and everything. And you think, oh, that's just the part of the gibberish that he's throwing out there. But then you find out, no, his father is really important and really wealthy, and this brilliant scientist. Which, what else was he saying that was true that didn't seem it at the time?
Yeah, his father, played by Christopher Plummer, which, as a side note, how awesome and how ridiculous is it to see Christopher Plummer with this foghorn leghorn Southern accent?
Yeah, it was weird. The accent really threw me. He did an okay job with it, though.
Oh no, absolutely. It really made me chuckle seeing him do that. Effect, knowing that he's British and to be able to affect that Jeffrey. And like when he's giving his speech at the house when they're back in 1996 and Cole has put Catherine Rayleigh locked her in the trunk. We don't know that until after, so he can go and try and confront Goines. And he goes to the Christopher Plummer. I wrote it down because it just, not only does it speaks to the way that it references other films and pop culture, because there's a lot of referencing, but also pointing to the traditional science fiction cautionary tale. But just he's up there and he's like, no, I don't have to tell you that the dangers of science are a time-worn threat, from Prometheus stealing fire from the gods to the Cold War era of Dr. Strangelove terror. So the fact that he's referencing Dr. Strangelove, it's very layered, like I said, with the referencing of like monkey business and time travel. And even in that same scene when Christopher Plummer doing this whole thing and references Dr. Strangelove, Goines says to Cole, he's like, oh, because there's a question of whether or not he remembers who he is, and he's going to tell his bodyguards to throw him out. And then when they're walking, by themselves, he's like, I know who you are, The Great Escape, 1990. So the movie, the last time I watched it, I was like, this movie is just packed with references to other movies as well, which ties into the Vertigo thing.
Yeah, that's totally true. Oh, I also wanted to talk about David Morse for a little bit.
Oh, creepo.
he's a guy that pops up in movies. Like, he's never been a big star. He's like very rarely starred in anything himself, but he's a great like secondary or third character. And the way they make him up in this with the blonde hair, like, even though he's probably got a minute and a half screen time, every time he's on the screen, you know there's something wrong with this guy.
Oh yeah, definitely. When you first see him, I think at Catherine Railly's signing.
Yep, at the signing, and he starts going off about, apocalyptic stuff.
Yeah, he says something along the lines that cracked me. It was like, pretty much saying like, humans are, responsible for, desecrating and destroying the planet. And he says something along like, you're going to give alarmists a bad name, and point more of the anti-consumerism, anti-establishment of like the Homo sapien motto of let's go shopping or something. He's so creepy. Like, he's just smiling the entire time, saying the weirdest stuff. And
it's a really good casting choice. I have to say, the cast of this movie was great.
Yeah, there's everyone is completely solid. Casting against, to some extent, casting against type. I mean, Bruce Willis was Die Hard, and he was at that point like the man's man action star, and this is a very different role and shows a very, very different side to himself. And he got a lot of good critical response for the way he approached this character.
Yeah, I have to say, I have a hard time with Bruce Willis.
Do?
I do. I'll admit that. I love Die Hard, greatest Christmas movie ever made. I'm not, and he was really good in Pulp Fiction, but a lot of movies, I just feel like he plays the same character to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, the same can be said for a lot of actors that we like, or I particularly like. But I thought there was a little bit of difference in how he is in this role. It's more the first half of the film.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he works in this, but I think it's playing against the typical Bruce Willis.
Yes.
The fact that he's so confused and he doesn't know what's going on. And that's something, in a way, it kind of makes him very vulnerable.
Oh, he's absolutely vulnerable, like both emotionally and physically, because even though he's described as someone who's like a beast, which goes to the animal theme, Cole is a beast. He can even drugged, he can like crack the skull of like 2 officers of 5 that are trying to wrestle him down. I mean, he's a fucking monster, right? Physically.
Oh yeah.
But he's always bloody. He's always fucked up. He's always like drooling on himself.
Yeah, it's a different take than I don't think he's ever played anything as similar to this before or after.
No, and it's also, spoiler, it's also like one of the only films where he's the hero, but he doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And that's also very different. Brad Pitt he got an Oscar nomination, but he didn't win that. But he did get a Golden Globe Award for this, and I think he deserves it.
Oh yeah, you believe he's crazy. I mean, you believe it's like Brad Pitt. It's kind of hard to watch movies with him sometimes because you just see him and you're like, oh, he's a big star. And in this, I totally dropped that. Like, I was just like, no, this is a crazy person that he's talking to.
Yeah, they had him working with someone to try to get that frenetic pace, and it's really good. He does an excellent job. And watching it, there are points when he's in the day room when you first meet him, he's kind of like in his own clothes. He's wearing his pajama pants over his regular tan pants, and then his pajama bottoms underneath, like it's layered different visual. Like the costuming is showing that he can hide his own insanity in some ways, because he's very well spoken for someone who's shitball crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying sounds just completely nuts. But yeah, he's not like hard to understand at all. But yeah, I loved his character. I mean, even when you see him later when he's at his dad's house, and he possibly could be on medication at that point because he's not as manic, but he's still a little off. He's still not totally there.
Yes. I wanted to point out something I saw, and I didn't read about it, and maybe it's obvious, but I figured out why he looks so fucking insane every time you see him. Is he obviously has a contact in his left eye to keep one eye stationary.
Oh, weird. I didn't notice that at the time, but now that you say it, I like thinking back on it. Yeah.
And it's subtle, but it totally works to have one eye that's completely cockeyed and so one eye is moving and the other is not really because it's a contact.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And also the first time you see him, when he pops his head out of what he was wearing, there's a cartoon noise. Especially in the day room, everything that's associated with Goins is accentuated with the sound by cartoon noises, even if there isn't a cartoon on.
Huh.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about it's really weird having watched this film about a pandemic while we're in an actual pandemic.
Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable.
At some point, like there's a lot of things like watching it with COVID colored lenses, some things that would not have stood out to you when the film first came out or when we saw it on VHS takes on completely other meanings or is much more important or salient now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting movie to watch during the pandemic and being stuck inside.
It's eerie in some of the ways that it's eerie to watch because it actually is happening. And so certain things that you wouldn't have thought that wouldn't mean the same thing back then, like when James Cole is brought back comes back and he's, deloused from being up on volunteer service. The first thing that the blonde security guy says when he brings him to the cabal of scientists is James Cole cleared from quarantine. And quarantine means something that has a lot more resonance now than it did back.
Oh yeah. No, you're right.
And there's other weird stuff like, I mean, that wall that he's in when he gets in that weird chair. I love that in that weird interrogation briefing room that they have with that chair that slides up into the ceiling.
Yeah, just one more thing to just one more thing to knock you off balance.
And then they have that wall that they keep changing. They keep putting like pictures and other information and headlines. One of the headlines I caught the last time I watched shows Christopher Plummer, and it says clock ticking, no cure yet, which made me go, It's very, very COVID-19. Or the other thing that I laughed out loud, going back to creepy David Morse trying to talk to Catherine Rayleigh at the signing, when they first cut to it, there's just this non sequitur of this guy who just got his book signed by Catherine, and he's like, I'm going to write out now to get vaccinated.
Yeah, it is creepy thinking about it in these times. Also, like just seeing Pittsburgh like devoid of people is not very comforting.
Right. I also want to talk about the weirdness of the interrogation ball. So you have this. Oh
yeah.
You have this ball, and it's got video screens, and each scientist and Cole is on that ball. And then they get the weird stuff where they got lenses or whatever. But it made me chuckle the last time I watched it because I was like, wow, this movie predicted Zoom meetings.
Yeah, kind of did.
Yeah, just as off-putting and invasive. To be fair to the 2035 future of 12 Monkeys, there are a lot less glitches than actual Zoom. No one freezes up when they're talking to Cole.
Yeah, you don't have to tell people you're on mute.
And one other COVID thing or recent thing that I was like, this is so bizarre. It's a quick part in the film, and it's mostly, I think, through a headline. But there is a clipping when he's at the Freedom for Animals Association headquarters, and he sees something, or maybe it was in the interrogation / briefing room in the future, where they show a clipping of Goins, and it says senators rattled because they had invaded the Capitol and he let loose 100 snakes.
Oh wow, I didn't catch that. That's crazy.
And I was like, that's kind of creepy. going the way that current events and the events of 12 Monkeys bizarrely mirror each other.
Yeah, that's a little frightening. Yeah, it definitely adds another layer to the movie.
Speaking of layers, how's your drink doing?
My drink is gone.
Your drink is gone.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm still working on mine. Obviously I'm talking too much.
No, you're doing good.
I better drink more.
Yeah, I didn't pour a huge amount. I just did a little, this being Sunday and all, trying to be good. I didn't go crazy.
I understand. I had a question, actually. So when you watch the film or watch films in general, do you have a drink when you watch the film?
Yeah, usually. I do. How about you?
Oh, I always do. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm not very sophisticated most of the time when I'm watching it. Most of the time, I'm very like Cobra Kai, Johnny Lawrence. So oh, it's time to watch a movie. I better bring out the old Coors Banquet.
No, I'm usually drinking bourbon. It's funny that I have scotch in the house because I usually don't. Through watching 12 Monkeys, I was drinking Henry McKenna 10-year-old bottled in bond, which is a great bourbon. My good friend Tommy gave it to me, and I finished it off before the podcast. That was what I was supposed to drink for the podcast, but that went gone.
That means it was good.
That was just too good. Yeah, it was too good to not hold on to.
We didn't talk about Frank Gorshin. How do we not talk about Frank Gorshin? Because he's so amazing. And Gina had never watched. No, Gina had actually seen the film before.
Okay.
And for the audience who doesn't know, Gina is my wife. And she recounted a tale of it was a horrible date that she had watched the film on. And so I think that colored her like remembrance of the film. She just like, 12 Monkeys. But I made her watch it with me, and she really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
No, she was very impressed, and she liked it, and said, yeah, I don't know why. I thought it was very difficult to follow, and I just wasn't into it because of the situation I was in. Which brings up, I forget, what was that article you sent me about the 25th anniversary? It was kind of like talking to David Peoples and Terry Gilliam.
Yeah, and it was interesting. He didn't hold any punches. He wasn't. And I'll add this I'll add the link to it in the notes of the podcast if anyone's interested. But it didn't seem like he just kept talking about Bruce Willis making an ass face.
I think the word sphincter was used.
Yes,
sphincter mouth.
Which I just thought was hilarious. After making this great movie and just having all these layers to it, and then like all you want to talk about 25 years later is Bruce Willis's face not being what you wanted.
But in that article, they bring up how difficult the material was for people. So David Peoples and Janet Peoples did this. They got the permission from Chris Marker, who through a dinner with Francis Ford Coppola, because Coppola was friends with Chris Marker, and he just kind of mentioned off the cuff, like, Janet and David would like to do this film based on on La Jette. I think you should let them do it. And Chris Marker was like, oh, okay. I thought it was going to be a big deal. The article goes on to describe how difficult it was. Like, Terry Gilliam saw it and he got it and was interested. But he had another film, I can't remember what it was, that he was supposed to be working on at the time and passed. And then they couldn't get other directors would look at it and they didn't know what to do with it. And I think that John Seda.
No, and then they dumbed it down at one point. They tried to put more stuff into it to explain what was going on, which Terry Gilliam, when he got that version of the script, hated and asked them to go back to the original. But what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was going to say that the article says that John Seda, who plays he plays the other prisoner that's in the cell next to him.
Jose.
I'm sorry?
He's Jose.
Yes. Thank you. Jose. He said that he says in that article something along the lines like, I didn't understand it until I watched the film, and the more I watch it, the more I understand it.
Yeah, it's a weird film. I don't think it would get made today.
Well, it's so great because it doesn't dumb anything down. Like, you either get it or you don't. And there are more questions than there are answers, and that's what's interesting to to me is that when you think about it, it doesn't hand you everything on a silver platter, which I think is great.
I mean, you could still have tons of questions about that. You could take any 15 minutes of the movie and you feel like you want more knowledge of what's going on in that scene.
No, definitely. Watching the film, Catherine Rayleigh, when she's giving her speech or her presentation on her book and talks about, this character from the 14th century that spoke in a different dialect and, warned about the dangers of a plague 600 years later, I thought that it was Cole, but then I remembered, wait a minute, they've had other people they've sent out before. So at first I thought it was him, and then I was like, oh wait, no. So the referencing on some of these things, some of it is Cole, like the World War I stuff that she discusses, but some of it probably was someone else, because I thought it was Cole, but the illustration shows someone who actually had a beard and stuff like that. And then there's stuff off the cuff, like I don't know what the character's name is, but the raspy voice guy that he keeps hearing is like, hey, Bob, you got a prob, Bob? Who tells him about...
Yeah, does that guy really exist, or is that just in Cole's head?
I don't know. Because at the end of... when you think of everything through, it doesn't quite add up, because you think maybe it's in Cole's head, and that's supposed to make Cole and the audience question the validity of what's going on in reality or whatever. But then he does some stuff where I think that character is I would point to as one part of the film where you really just don't know,
right? Because
he says stuff that it's like, oh, he shows that he's taking on his teeth. It's like that's how they can follow you through the the transponder in your teeth, which leads Cole to becoming what that dude. By the way, that dude who plays the pimp that comes in towards the end or whatever, I'm pretty sure he's the bad guy in Long Kiss Goodnight as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But when he says like, oh, that crazy fucking dentist, when he's taking out his teeth or whatever, and then he turns on a dime where then he acts like he doesn't know what's going on. And when Cole disappears after he's gone to the mansion to talk to Goins, and he disappears when the cops show up and she's by herself, she goes to the Freedom for Animals Association by herself, and that guy, the raspy guy, comes up to her and he's like, you got to be careful, they're taking photos, which he says something and it's obviously true, and then he acts like he's completely, because in the scene previous you see that they put up new photos in the interrogation / briefing room that says like, was it 5 million died? Like, is this the source of the virus? And then you see her actually do it.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. It's very hard to figure that part out. I don't think you're supposed to be able to.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of things. There's a couple of questions. I mean, there are a lot of themes and motifs in the film. Like I said, there's animals. There's the theme and motif of eyes. Would you agree? Perception and modes of spying and seeing, like Cole's always being spied on. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was glasses. Now, glasses, it seems to me that glasses are somewhat a symbol of power or authority in this film, because you have the scientists and of the seven that he's, I may be wrong in the numbering, but of the scientists that he's constantly talking to that keeps sending him back into the past, only one scientist doesn't wear glasses. It's the woman. And like the scientists in La Jette always wear glasses. And I thought it was funny, that Powerball Zoom meeting ball that comes, the video screens also have like some of them have like monocles and glasses on top of that. Like it's almost ridiculous and cartoonish just how much attention it gives to that.
Yeah, I didn't really catch that. That's a good catch.
Also, when Jeffrey is back at his father's house, he has the long hair, which is supposed to confuse the audience as well as Cole to thinking that he's the one in Cole's memory in the airport, because now he has long hair. But in 1996, because he's back with his father and he's back in like not in a mental institution, he's back grounded supposedly in the real world with his father in a rich environment, Goins wears glasses. Didn't wear glasses in the asylum.
Huh. Yeah, wow. You're right. I didn't piece that together till you mentioned it just now, but yeah. The glasses is a big part of this.
And the last thing I'll bring up is Christopher Plummer, because this one made me crack up. As Jeffrey's upset, and he's like, "My father's give a very important address," when his bodyguards are like, "There's this dude who showed up. He says he knows you, and he doesn't have his shoes on for some reason," which cracked me. And he's sleeping, and he goes, and Christopher Plummer notices, and as he notices that Jeffrey is kind of being escorted out, he takes out of his pocket the craziest. He takes out this crazy, like, spring-loaded flip opening set of, like, opera glasses on a chain to, like, look at Jeffrey. Like, it's very bizarre.
Oh, weird. I didn't catch that at all. Well, I'll tell you one thing that I didn't think worked in this: the love story angle. Catherine, Madeline Stowe's character, like, at one point she, like, kisses Cole, and I was just like, I guess. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Apparently, you're not the only one. The test audiences didn't see it either.
Really?
And yeah. And this ties into this brings us back to Vertigo.
Okay.
So the end of the film, they wind up in a theater, the Senator Theater in Baltimore, I believe, and gorgeous theater, from at least the way the movie makes it seem. And they just happen to go to this theater is having a 24-hour Hitchcock marathon. And so when they first go and they're talking, and Cole says something, and this leads up to what you were talking about. But Cole says a line that struck me to my core as a cinephiliac. He's watching it, and the Vertigo, and it's a scene where Judy, dressed as Madeline, is with Jimmy Stewart Scott and Scotty, and they're looking at this cross section of a tree, and she's like, and she points like, "Here I was born and here I die," and that's referenced in La Jette when he points to the woman and says, "Oh, I am from here," and he does that whole thing with the tree. And in that point, La Jette, it was a direct referencing to Vertigo, because Chris Marker was apparently enamored and obsessed with Vertigo, and it ties his whole theme. The La Jette, the memory is a major theme in La Jette. It's also a major theme in 12 Monkeys. But what Cole says that struck me to my core is, he says, it's just like what's happening with. He says something like, "I've seen this movie before," and it's just like what's happening with us, like the past. The movie never changes. It can't change, but every time you see it, it seems different. Because you are different. You see different things. And that, going back to, we're talking about looking at this film through COVID-colored lenses and during a pandemic, it's like, oh, we see different things because we are different, because we're actually in a pandemic. And so going back to what you said, that you didn't believe the love story, the test audience didn't either. So what they decided to do was, in that scene after he falls asleep, she glues the fake mustache and the hair on him. He falls asleep and he wakes up, and birds are on, right? Hitchcock's The Birds. And he goes out, he sees Captain Rayleigh, and she's just ordered tickets for the plane, but she's now the Hitchcock blonde. And the thing that struck me when I was watching is that it plays this music. Now, he obviously just left from watching The Birds, but the music is specifically from Vertigo. And the nerd in me had a bug up my ass where I was like, this has got to. So I looked at the soundtrack, and I believe, and there are others who maybe, I am not an expert in Vertigo, and I'm not an expert in 12 Monkeys. And so we may get people telling me that I'm wrong. But when I looked it up and I listened to the track that they chose for that scene of them, like, trying to bring this romance together, is the track is called "The Past and the Woman," which I thought was amazing. And they try to use music to imbue this scene with this kind of romance and aura of mystery. So you're not the only one who had that issue, obviously.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love the movie. That's my only real criticism of it, is that I felt like that was just tacked on. There wasn't much leading up to that. Like, if anything, they were kind of somewhat adversarial until that point.
Well, I want to ask you, from watching the film, so Catherine Rayleigh keeps saying, like, I felt like I've met you somewhere before, I've seen you before, and it's throughout the film until that scene, she straight out says, I remember you like this. I felt like I've known you before, and I feel like I've always known you. And I don't quite, I don't know if I'm not getting, I wasn't picking up on clues or something. Why do you think Catherine Rayleigh has this sense throughout the entire film that she's known or met Cole before? Because the interesting thing is she's not the one who can time travel.
Right. Yeah, she shouldn't have those opinion, basically. I don't know. I thought that those, like, her mentioning that stood out to me, but I just kind of accepted it was never going to get resolved.
I don't have an answer either. I've been racking my brain to try and figure. I was like, well, did Cole have Johnson to the past that he doesn't remember or we haven't seen? But I said, but that still doesn't make any sense, because it would only make sense if, and also we should mention, I don't know if you're aware, I know nothing about it, but they did do a TV series on 12 Monkeys.
I saw that. I've never seen the TV series. I don't know if it's any good or not.
I don't know, but if I ever do watch it, which would be quite a commitment, I wonder if they address that in some way. Maybe in a TV series they do something where Cole winds up in the past before 1990, where he meets Catherine Rayleigh.
That would make a lot of sense. Although it's weird that he doesn't remember it.
He doesn't remember it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have the answers. Or maybe it's completely supposed to be a metaphysical, like they were made for each other kind of soulmates. I don't know. I have no idea. But I did. That's why I asked you specifically, since you were, and again, I get your point 100%. It's not completely organic. It's not totally terrible, but it's not completely organic.
Yeah, it just seems like it just struck me as the one thing in the movie that I was like, I don't know if I buy this. In a movie that has a lot of things that you could say that about.
Right.
So it's kind of weird that the one thing that I couldn't accept was like the most conventional part of the story. You want to talk about the ending?
Cole says something earlier in the film when he's in the day room and he's drugged out and he's trying to write a love letter to Catherine with a crayon, and they're showing stuff on the TV screen of experimentation on monkeys and rabbits. He says off the cuff to Goins, he's like, look at him. We're just asking for it. Maybe the human race deserves to be wiped out. And the end of the film kind of proves that Cole is right, because at the end of the film, Cole makes a call to the carpet company or whatever, which goes saying, hey, I'm not going to come back. And then Jose pops up and all these guys pop up and they give him a gun, like, you got to do this thing. You got to stop it. This time you got to follow, do what you're supposed to do. If you don't come back, we got to shoot the lady. And Cole says, I'm like, oh, so this has nothing to do with the virus. This is about following orders. And that's the scientists, after all that Cole has done, all he wants to do is he just wants a chance at happiness. And now it may be not viable or the best, I don't know how he could exist in his own timeline. That obviously scientifically wouldn't be good, but still their solution is to punish him by giving a gun so that they know that he will be killed. They set him up to be killed because he didn't follow orders. They didn't have to do that.
I mean, they had enough information that they could have sent the whole team of people back at that point if they really wanted to stop the virus.
Yeah. So after he does all this, and they're, the scientists who are fighting to help save humanity sentence this man to die just because, he didn't follow orders. So it's fucked up that at the end of everything, maybe now they have the pure virus, they have the cure for humanity, but humanity, of course, they don't fucking learn. They never learn. Like, they still commit a crime against humanity.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark ending.
It's extremely cynical. I mean, his films tend to be, Time Bandits. Time Bandits is another time travel film of his that I love, which, oddly enough, we're discussing this film for its 25th anniversary, but Time Bandits came out in 1981, like in November. So we're approaching the 40th anniversary of Time Bandits.
Oh, wow.
That also touches upon a lot of the same things, where this movie begins and ends on the eyes of a child, 8-year-old child. that film deals with, I think the kid's 11. It's very cynical and it's very dark, but it's more comedic than 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
And fun. But it also plays with this whole idea of perception, since Sean Connery plays both Agamemnon and the fireman at the end of the film when he returns home. And it also has all the anti-consumerism, anti-establishment themes that are in this film. But it ends with he comes back through that adventure and he's left, and his parents touched the wrong piece of in the microwave, and they're just they're killed. He's made an orphan at the end of the film. So classic cautionary tale about science and meddling with the things, man meddling with the things they are not meant to. If you do go through time, whether it's to have adventures and steal stuff with a bunch of midgets or to try and stop a pandemic, you have to pay. You got to pay.
Right.
So Cole dies, and that kid gets his parents murdered.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, just side note, my mother took me to see Time Bandits. I was pretty young. She hated that movie.
Gina hates Time Bandits with a passion.
Really? I like it.
I love Time. I own Time Bandits. I own the Criterion Time Bandits. I own the Arrow Video, 12 Monkeys. I love that shit.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was a great movie, and I thought the ending was really shocking to a little kid. For a kid's movie, it was pretty bold.
Oh, and that's why Gina didn't like it, because it's fucked up. Just like the ending of 12 Monkeys is fucked up.
Yeah, I read something. He said that someone asked him about happy endings, and he said, my characters don't have happy endings. If they're lucky, they survive.
That's pretty spot on and pretty badass. Terry Gilliam and his films are like, the way the world is right now is fucking bonkers. And he's obsessed with crazy people because they make more fucking sense.
Yeah, so overall, though, I have to say, it's a pretty damn good movie.
Yes, definitely. I think it's infinitely rewatchable. You learn something. I think it holds up on its own, right?
It doesn't seem dated at all.
No, I enjoyed it. It was a pleasure revisiting again and again. The future is history, as it says. And it's jam-packed with so much stuff. There's so much stuff there's more stuff that I'm sure you could say or I could say, but I guess we should wind down.
You hear the theme music, so that means we're kind of coming to the end.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. Our next episode is going to be quite different, especially in its tone and work. It's going to be a hoot. We're going to be discussing, continuing with the theme of animals from 12 Monkeys. We are going to discuss Birds of Prey and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you joining us for our first podcast.
Yep, and if you feel we got anything wrong or just want to say hi or want to check up on any notes, come to the cinephiliaclounge.com.